Hello there, Commonwealth from here. Nintendo has added a little bit more information regarding Ocarina of Time Remake, plus we have a change that we didn't really cover in the last couple of videos. The first one is a description from the official website, which has been changed and altered, and that is that the N64 Classic Reborn has a full remake for Nintendo Switch 2. So we have two confirmations here. Number one, Reborn, pretty much the return of it or rebirth of the game as a full remake. Some are discussing if it's going to be one-to-one or it's going to be seeing some significant changes, especially since it does add to it afterwards that experience Ocarina of Time with stunning visuals, updated designs, and timeless gameplay. Of course, a lot of this describes what the game is already. When we talk about stunning visuals, of course, it's the upgrade, the new art style. We also see that Link's hat looks a little bit different. We see the change in the opening scene where Link doesn't wear boots anymore, or the hat for that matter. It's hanging around. The boots are probably on the floor below. The particles, effects, much of it is already describing what we saw in that little scene, showing the awakening in many ways. Timeless gameplay could tie to, we have the present and future sections, you know, with the Ocarina, and this alone makes it rather clear that you wouldn't bring up time or timeless without making it 100% sure that no, we're not splitting this game up into multiple parts. We don't need that because we already have a game that will be in the same art style later on in a remake if this does well. Majora's Mask. It also goes along when we think about it with the fact that this is the only 3D Zelda without dual analog camera controls, as I brought up so many times now. There's cut content galore, something that can impact both the dungeon, gameplay department, controls. But what is interesting, and I think is the biggest change really, what happens right after we see Child Link and the Hero of Time with the glowing mark of the hero, the potential Triforce, namely the logo reveal. Because what do we see here? Well, for one, the font is based on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But what is behind it? We see the Hylian shield, and it doesn't have that design that it used to have all those years ago in 1998, but also in Ocarina of Time 3D, where you had that extra Triforce mark. Personally, I think it always has symbolized the Triforce of Courage. Some have been talking about the Tetraforce, especially after what we got with Null in Echoes of Wisdom. But as we can see here, the shield is the one that is based on the design that was first introduced in Twilight Princess and then standardized from Skyward Sword, where it hasn't changed at all, and it seems like they're trying to standardize all of it. So modernizing these all 3D games that have different designs, different setups, is a way of bringing these games up to date per se. And the same goes really for the Master Sword as well, because the Master Sword design wasn't really set in stone. It changed a lot since it was introduced in A Link to the Past. Ocarina of Times had a very different hilt and also shape when one thinks about it. The same went for the Wind Waker. We only got a more iconic version of it in Twilight Princess, which again was standardized with Skyward Sword. We know what we're talking about here since we have done the timeline of the Master Sword as well. What does this mean that the Hero of Time of all heroes will be wielding this shield and this sword? It is a big departure because one of the key moments in Ocarina of Time is the Master Sword pool, and the fact that the Master Sword is how you travel gameplay-wise from present to the future. So changing these two iconic staples of the franchise, that being the Hylian shield, which of course is a little bit more optional per se, but the Master Sword, it is the key storytelling tool. Outside of the Ocarina of Time itself, it is the tool that is used in Ocarina of Time like in almost no other game. Only Twilight Princess allows you to somewhat travel back in time when you enter the Temple of Time, and through it, it's Light Temple. So the question really begs then, is Nintendo going to change far more than we have anticipated, apart from just the designs and standardizing the current Master Sword and Hylian shield design also in traditional Zelda? Because in many ways, when we look at the Hyrule games, there's only two ones that don't have the current Master Sword design. That has been Ocarina of Time and the Wind Waker. In Wind Waker, there's speculation that it's a completely different sword. Well, we could get a remake of that also in the future, and suddenly this is the design that they're going for. It is clear that something is going on with this remake. It's being reborn, it's being changed, it's being likely expanded, both when it comes to the world and level design, because we are likely to have the same temples, but are we going to end up with the same puzzles? Are we going to end up with the same mini bosses? Are we going to still end up with the same bosses? There's a lot of things that could go right or wrong, and the thing here is that the change of the Master Sword indicates more than anything that certain aspects of the story of Ocarina of Time could also change in the remake. Because the sword is the big storytelling tool. It's the one that confirms that Link was too young to wield it when he pulls it in the Temple of Time. It is the first thing that is noticeable, that you become adult Link and pull it right after when Sheik is introduced. And the same goes for many other situations, like the boss fight against Phantom Ganon. It goes without saying that a very careful balance that Nintendo needs to strike here with this remake, or striking already, because of course the remake is probably pretty much done at this point, that they have no other choice but to deliver. They need to deliver on a game that, one, respects the original, but also is modernized to such a degree that it may have new solutions. And we already had Master Quest, luckily, which means that we are ready for other puzzles and other solutions and other setups. But on the other side, what Andre from GameXplain also brought here is that it's indicating more towards one-to-one remakes, which means that maybe it's not going to be as much. And if anything, they're probably just going to add new stuff instead of altering what is already there. Because a lot of what is in Ocarina of Time is already brilliant, and especially the pacing. If you mess with the pacing, you are going to also mess up this remake. We don't want a tedious Ocarina of Time experience. We want something that flows naturally like time itself. And that is in many ways what we are looking at here based on what we have seen thus far. Obviously, the tapestry is a new introduction, where it's clearly the intro to the game, much like we have seen in the case of Skyward Sword being the original, seeing that we had that whole ancient war, or the war of the goddess, against the bringer of the mice. What we need to realize is that Ocarina of Time is a game where there is just potential after potential after potential, where there's so many things that could be expanded upon, and thus given more of an organic nature when you think about it. Starting from the start of the game with Link's house, which we already saw an alteration of in Ocarina of Time 3D. We are already seeing that there is an alteration here as well, unless he is inside the Deku Tree, and that is one of the changes that are being made. But when it comes to the Temple of Time and the castle, it really begs a question if these locations are not going to be looking very different. The same goes with Hyrule Castle Town, which of course will likely have the market, but it could be so much more beyond it, not just a back alley. And the path to the Temple of Time, expanded territories, whether that's in Hyrule Field, Lake Hylia, the path up to Zora's Domain, so Zora's River, Kokiri Forest. Like, all of these things could be why the reveal, or the tease specifically, only consisted of that quick introduction to the land of Hyrule and the Kokiri, plus the Great Deku Tree and the Hero of Time. Because what if this world has drastically changed? Not in the terms of main story beats, but more of the things that happened in between those story beats. Something we have also in many ways seen with the Resident Evil remakes, that being 2, 3, and 4, what has probably served as inspiration for Nintendo when deciding to remake their most universally praised entry in the series, at least when it came to the score on Metacritic, as it is the only game with a 99 out of 100. And these are in many ways changes that could go all the way from the beginning, as we have already seen with the reveal teaser, all the way to the final battle, as partially has already been teased through the Lego set, where you might be able to make that big jump towards Ganon, and what's more, realize that Shadow of the Colossus concept that had to be scrapped due to system limitations back in 1998. Ocarina of Time is a game of limitations and cut content, one that could finally be addressed. And if combined with what we got in Ocarina of Time 3D, especially the boss rush mode there, and also perhaps, though it's less likely, Master Quest, then we are definitely looking at a game that could once again become the best rated game of all time. But it's all about striking that balance and respecting the pacing that this game has always mastered. The question really comes down to how big of a game this really is. There have been rumors about a massive budget for a while. Nick is the one who brought that up. It's clear that the Zelda team and Nintendo has a plan when it comes to all of this, and the main aim is bring the old classics up to date, making it shine, as well as the Nintendo Switch 2, a much more powerful hardware than the Nintendo Switch is able to provide, hence all of these visual changes, hence why we see the description of stunning visuals, updated designs, and of course, timeless gameplay. It is all about just turning Ocarina of Time into a game that is worthy of being called sort of new in 2026, and also being nominated and maybe even winning Game of the Year at the Game Awards this year. The most interesting by far is the Master Sword and Hylian Shield change, because that indicates that something is going on. Question is, are they going open air with this more? They're definitely likely expanding things here and adding new purpose to things that were lacking it or just were limited by the N64 and the 3DS. But what do you think? Do you think that this reborn version of Ocarina of Time will be gameplay wise and location wise pretty much a new game while we follow the same story? Or do you think that Nintendo is going to go even more drastically as a result of the new Hylian Shield and Master Sword design that is matching the one of Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, plus partially also Twilight Princess, which introduced the path towards this design? Sound off in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and press notification bell to miss any upcoming videos. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching, and to all our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to our heroes Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holy Wolf, and Kintar. You rock, and please enjoy these awesome videos.